Before you hear the rest, promise me you won't try to look him up. Some names shouldn't be spoken out loud. Dr. Cade Vellum is one of them. And if you're already curious, already imagining yourself typing his name into a search bar, stop. Curiosity is exactly what he counts on. I shouldn't be alive. I know people say that after car crashes or freak accidents, but I mean it in the most literal way possible. I shouldn't be alive because the organs inside my body, every last one, don't belong to me. They used to be mine. They used to follow my heartbeat and my breath. Now they belong to him. Sometimes, when the room is quiet, I swear they still listen for his voice. I was a surgical resident once, sharp enough to impress the senior staff, naive enough to believe brilliance makes someone trustworthy. Vellum knew how to find people like me. He saw the cracks long before I did. And maybe that's why the first time I felt something twitch under my ribs, something that didn't quite move like it should, I thought it was just stress, or exhaustion, or the price of chasing perfection. But flashes come back now, jagged and incomplete. Cold metal under my spine. Bright ceiling lights blurred into halos. The wet sound of something being lifted out of me. A silhouette leaning over my chest, calm as a priest during confession. His voice soft, clinical, pleased. You'll thank me when it's done. I couldn't scream. I remember trying, but all that left my mouth was a thin breath, like someone else exhaling for me. Sometimes I still feel that breath, and it never matches the rhythm of my lungs. People think monsters hide in forests or abandoned buildings. No. Some wear surgical masks and smell like antiseptic. Some keep their secrets in jars stacked higher than your head. Some are still alive, still harvesting, still looking for the next candidate who won't be missed. If you feel a tightness in your chest while listening to this, don't panic. It's just your body reacting to the truth. At least, I hope it's yours. And if any part of you thinks this is just another late-night story meant to scare you for fun, let me clarify. I'm not trying to entertain you. I'm trying to warn you. Because the moment you hear his name, the moment you imagine his face, he notices you too. To understand how I ended up like this, we have to go back to the beginning. Before all of this, before the surgeries, the whispers, the feeling that my own heartbeat wasn't entirely mine, my life was painfully normal. I was an overworked surgical resident, the kind who joked that sleep was a myth and that the hospital coffee was brewed from the tears of interns who quit before orientation ended. I lived in that fluorescent-lit blur where days fused together, where your scrubs always smelled faintly of iodine, and where you learned to laugh at things that definitely weren't funny outside a hospital cafeteria. My colleagues were the closest thing to a family I had. There was Mara, who swore she'd transfer if they ever put her on another trauma rotation, Ben, who flirted with every nurse but panicked when one flirted back, and Patel, who had this unsettling habit of staring a second too long at abnormal scans, like he wanted the tumors to talk to him. We were young, burnt out, and full of dark humor, competing for the best cases like kids trading lunch snacks. It felt normal at the time. Comfortable, even. The hospital itself had a rhythm, one you learned to trust. Morning rounds, evening discharges, the predictable chaos of night shifts. But there were cracks I never paid attention to. Nights when certain wings went unusually quiet. Patients who were transferred with no listed diagnosis. A restricted surgical suite on the 4th floor that we all assumed was for VIP operations, even though none of us had ever seen a VIP there. If you asked too many questions, the attendings gave you a tight smile and said, "Focus on your work." So, I did. Still, something always felt slightly off. Some deaths happened too suddenly. Some patients vanished before we could follow up. A few times, a page would buzz through the resident hall asking for assistance in a wing that didn't appear on our floor map. Someone would mutter that it had to be a glitch, but the silence afterward always felt a little too thick, a little too deliberate. Looking back, the warnings were everywhere. But when you're exhausted and running on cold coffee and ambition, you stop noticing the shadows. You just keep moving. You convince yourself hospitals are strange places by nature, that weird things happen because medicine is weird, not because something darker is happening just beyond the places we're allowed to walk. And then there were the rumors. A surgeon no one had met but everyone whispered about. A man who supposedly operated alone. A name spoken like a superstition, low, casual, but with a stiffness around the edges. We dismissed it as residency folklore, another ghost story meant to scare the new recruits. I laughed at it, too. I shouldn't have. Everything changed the night he walked in, my mentor, my curse. Dr. Cade Vellum entered our hospital like a rumor deciding to take physical form, and the air changed the moment he stepped through the double doors. He wasn't tall or imposing, but there was something about the way he carried himself, precise, quiet, perfectly measured, that made everyone instinctively lower their voices. His coat was spotless, his movements unhurried, and his eyes scanned the halls as if he were assessing a specimen rather than walking through a workplace. People called him the miracle surgeon, though no one could agree on who started the name or why it stuck. When I first met him, he appeared behind me during morning rounds without a single sound announcing his arrival. "You're the resident with the steady hands," he said, his voice warm but unsettlingly soft. I nodded, unsure how he even knew my name. "Good," he added. "You have potential. I can feel it in your hands, and somewhere deeper." He held my gaze a second too long, as if he were looking through my skin rather than at it. I laughed awkwardly, assuming he was one of those eccentric geniuses every hospital inevitably attracts. But his stare lingered, and I found myself wondering what, exactly, he thought he saw in me. The rumors spread quickly. Nurses whispered that he operated alone because no one could keep up with him. Another resident swore she saw him finish a procedure without a single drop of blood on his gloves. Some said he never blinked under the operating lights. Others claimed he avoided sunlight entirely. No one admitted to being afraid of him, but the silences that followed his name said enough. He chose me as his mentee without explanation. One afternoon he simply told the attending, "He'll assist me from now on," and that was that. I should have felt honored. Instead, I felt examined. Vellum asked questions other surgeons never bothered with. Had I ever fainted? Did I heal quickly? Was I prone to pain in specific organs? His words, not mine. He listened to my heartbeat during a routine check and hummed, as if hearing a tune only he recognized. Working with him was like stepping into another world. His operating room felt colder than the others, the lights sharper, the silence heavier. He didn't need instructions or confirmations, his hands moved with a predatory confidence. Sometimes the tissue he exposed looked wrong in ways I couldn't articulate, too healthy, too dark, too alive. He never explained, and I never asked. Fear grows fast in quiet places. His reputation came with unspoken warnings. A nurse once muttered, "Stay close to him, but not too close," before pretending she hadn't said anything. Another resident advised me to keep track of my own medical chart. I laughed it off at the time. But Vellum didn't release people easily. The longer I worked with him, the more intently he watched me, not my performance, but my body itself. His eyes tracked my chest as though memorizing the organs beneath. He noted my pulse, my breathing, my potential. Once he said the human body was wasted on most people, then added, "Yours could be refined." I didn't understand. I should have. He studied me more each day closely. My first shift with him should have been my last. The first impossible operation happened on a Tuesday night, the kind of shift where exhaustion turns your thoughts into static. Vellum summoned me with a whispered order, his tone calm enough to feel dangerous. The patient was prepped when I entered the operating room, a thin man whose chart listed nothing but experimental consent on file. His skin looked oddly pale under the surgical lights, almost translucent. Vellum didn't bother with introductions or briefs, he motioned for me to scrub in. Something in the air felt wrong, too still, too cold, as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something I wasn't prepared to witness. When the incision began, I expected the usual rush of blood, the flush that accompanies the first cut. But nothing came. The scalpel parted the skin cleanly, and the tissue beneath looked strangely pristine, like it had been rinsed moments before. Vellum didn't react, he simply continued, his hands steady, his eyes focused with unnerving intensity. As he opened the chest cavity, I saw the heart beating with a rhythm too slow to sustain life, yet too strong to belong to someone anesthetized. It pulsed once, then paused for almost 10 seconds before resuming, as if waiting for permission. Vellum whispered, "Beautiful," like he was admiring artwork instead of exposed organs. Then came the instruments I didn't recognize. He reached for a tray that hadn't been there earlier, sleek metal tools that glinted like they'd been forged for something other than surgery. One resembled a tuning fork, another looked like a cross between forceps and a needle driver but was jointed in impossible ways. He used them with practiced ease. He lifted the heart entirely out of the cavity, and to my horror, it kept twitching in his palm, as if loyal only to his touch. There was still no blood, not even a smear on his gloves. He pressed one of the strange tools to the heart's surface, and it shuddered like it recognized him. The patient should have been unconscious, but as Vellum adjusted the instrument, the man's lips began to move. At first, I thought it was a reflex, a random twitch, but then a sound pushed through thin, raspy, unmistakably deliberate. "Stop," he whispered. It wasn't loud, but hearing a conscious plea from someone with their chest open is something that cracks your reality in half. I froze, my mind scrambling for anything that made sense. Vellum didn't stop. He didn't even look at the patient. He murmured, "Ignore it." Memory firing. But the voice came again, stronger, trembling with terror. "Please, it hurts." The heart in Vellum's hand twitched violently, as if echoing the plea. I remember feeling my stomach twist, a primal instinct telling me to run, but my feet stayed planted. Vellum continued manipulating the heart, humming under his breath, guiding the organ as if coaxing it into obedience. The monitors displayed nothing rational, flatline spikes followed by readings that looked almost mechanical. Then he placed the heart back into the chest, and the man's body jerked upward, spine arching as though something inside him was fighting to escape. Vellum calmly pushed him back down. "He'll settle," he said, as if this were a routine annoyance. When the final suture was placed, the man's breathing stabilized into a pattern I'd never heard before: slow, uneven, wrong. I left the room shaking, certain I'd witnessed something no human was meant to see. That night, he asked me a question that still keeps me awake. He cornered me the same night as that impossible surgery, just as I tried to slip out of the resident lounge and convince myself I hadn't seen what I'd seen. Vellum stepped into the doorway like he had been waiting for me to pass through it. His expression was calm, almost gentle, but his eyes carried that same searching intensity, like he was looking for cracks beneath my ribs. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said. "Better than most." I muttered something about adrenaline, about doing my job, about not fainting like a normal human should have. He stepped closer, too close, close enough that I felt the cold precision of his gaze sweep over my chest. "You have weaknesses," he murmured. "Not your fault. Genetic imperfections. But weaknesses nonetheless." I laughed. I actually laughed, thinking he was making some elitist joke about my stamina after the shift. "Yeah, well, join the club," I said. "I think all of us are falling apart." He didn't laugh. Instead, he tilted his head. "I can fix you." It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't even a question. It was a declaration delivered with the confidence of someone who had already decided the outcome. I brushed him off gently, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. "Thanks, but I'll stick with my flawed human hardware." His lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Your organs are loyal, but loyalty can be improved." A chill slid down my spine, the same way a cold retractor slips under exposed tissue. I stepped around him and escaped into the hallway, shaking my head, trying to convince myself he was joking. But from that moment on, he watched me with a focus that felt less like mentorship and more like assessment. He began monitoring my vitals under the excuse of evaluation. He checked my pulse during rounds, held my wrist longer than necessary, his fingers lingering like he was memorizing the rhythm. He asked questions that made no medical sense. Did my lungs ever feel restless? Did my kidneys hum when I was stressed? I told him no, because what else do you say to a man who dissects impossible organs like they're puzzles he's already solved? Then he started appearing in places he had no reason to be. In the stairwell when I took a late-night break. In the cafeteria at dawn, sitting alone, watching me over the rim of a coffee mug he never drank from. Once, I swear I saw him outside my apartment building, though by the time I blinked, he had disappeared into the morning fog like he'd never been there at all. The worst part came when I overheard two nurses whispering near the supply closet. He said he improved her, one whispered. And now? She didn't make it. The word improved echoed through my skull long after they walked away. I should have run then. I should have transferred, quit, done anything except return to that hospital the next day. But I didn't. I kept going, because that's what residents do. We normalize the impossible when we're too tired to be afraid. Then one night, I woke up on the operating table. I woke with a jolt I couldn't control. My eyes snapped open, and for a moment I thought I was dreaming, then realized I couldn't move a muscle. My arms were pinned to the table, my legs strapped down, and a cold, metallic taste coated my tongue. The anesthesia hadn't worked fully, or perhaps it was never meant to. Pain, or something worse, crawled along my nerves, but I couldn't speak, couldn't scream. I could only watch. Vellum stood over me, calm as a man reading a newspaper, his gloves spotless. The lights above cast long shadows across the room, and I saw the tools laid out beside him. Some were ordinary scalpels, clamps, retractors, but others, twisted impossibly, gleamed unnaturally, as if forged for someone who understood anatomy better than nature itself intended. He worked with precision that defied logic. I saw my heart lifted, not with hesitation or strain, but with the meticulous care of a craftsman polishing porcelain. My lungs shivered in his hands. My kidneys seemed to pulse independently, alive in a way that no human organ should. I thought, bitterly, that at least this was one way to void the warranty on my body. "Don't struggle," he said softly, almost kindly. "Your old organs should be grateful they were wasting potential." Grateful. My kidneys, my liver, my heart, all supposedly grateful for removal. My stomach churned. Something darkly humorous flickered through my terror, the kind of thought only a person on the brink of losing themselves entirely could conceive. Great. Goodbye warranty. Hello, Frankenstein upgrades. He worked methodically, replacing organs, swapping tissue like a gardener pruning branches. I could feel the shifts in my body, the pressure of a rib lifted, the subtle twitch of a nerve, the sensation of my circulatory system being rewritten piece by piece. Every second stretched into eternity, every twitch of the new organs a silent scream I couldn't voice. And then I noticed the shelves along the walls. Glass jars stacked floor to ceiling, each containing organs bathed in some clear fluid, labeled in meticulous handwriting. Some bore names I didn't recognize. Others, dates, years in the future. Some labels even matched my own initials. I blinked, forcing my eyes to focus, and my chest tightened in a panic I couldn't express. The jars seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive, waiting for their turn. Vellum hummed quietly, occasionally consulting a notebook filled with diagrams that made no anatomical sense, yet somehow aligned perfectly with the chaos around us. He replaced a lung, then pressed his gloved hand to my chest, whispering, "This will make you worthy." His calm, deliberate tone contrasted so violently with the horror unfolding that I wanted to vomit, laugh, and cry all at once. Time lost meaning. Every heartbeat felt like a small betrayal, like the rhythm I had trusted my entire life had been sold to someone else. My vision blurred as he moved to my abdomen. I thought I could feel the muscles shift under his hands, reorganizing themselves against the rules of biology. The smell of antiseptic mixed with something metallic, a tang that made my stomach twist. At one point, my throat forced out a noise, maybe a whimper, maybe nothing, but he paused, tilted his head, and whispered directly to me, "This is not pain. This is evolution." I wanted to argue, to beg, to scream, but none of those words could pass through the paralysis. I was a witness to my own dismantling. And beneath the terror, beneath the nausea and disbelief, curiosity gnawed at me. Not about survival, there was none, but about what he was making and why. When he finally stepped back, wiping his hands, I saw myself reflected in the metallic surface of a tray. My chest rose unevenly, a twitching symphony of organs that were mine and not mine. I knew I had been changed in ways no doctor, no textbook, no medical ethics could ever account for. My body had become a vessel, one designed for a purpose I didn't yet understand. And then I passed out. Or maybe I didn't. I don't remember how I escaped. Maybe I didn't. I woke at home days later, though woke doesn't quite capture it. My eyelids fluttered open to the dim morning light, and every breath felt alien. The stitches along my chest and abdomen pulled painfully with every movement, reminders that my body was no longer entirely mine. I shivered uncontrollably, not from cold, but from the awareness that my insides were moving differently, reacting in ways that didn't match my intentions. I used to worry about failing exams, forgetting protocols, fumbling a scalpel. Now I worried about what was inside me. My heart skipped rhythms that weren't mine, my stomach ached with a hunger I didn't recognize, and sometimes my lungs shivered independently, as if they were recalling someone else's exertion. Blackout struck without warning. For a few seconds, minutes even, I felt outside myself, watching my body from somewhere distant and unfamiliar. At first, I convinced myself it was shock, trauma, or some reaction to anesthesia. But the sensations escalated. I could hear too much: the ticking of clocks, the hum of appliances, the faintest whispers of voices in the walls. Sometimes, buried beneath my own pulse, I heard something else, a soft, deliberate rhythm, like a voice trying to sync with mine. "Vellum." His words were faint but clear. "Observe. Adapt. Serve." It was in my heartbeat, my lungs, the subtle shifts of my intestines. I couldn't shut it out. The blackouts revealed more than I wanted to know. During them, flashes of memory that weren't mine flickered across my mind. A man running through a foggy corridor. The sound of a scalpel sliding across a ribcage. A whispered apology. The moments were fragmented, like film reels cut and spliced by a hand that didn't belong to me. I realized, with a creeping horror, that these memories belonged to someone else, someone whose organs now pulsed inside me. I began to notice subtle changes in my reflexes, the way my hands gripped things, the way my vision tracked motion. I could sense small movements beneath my skin, tiny shifts in muscles I couldn't command. When I tried to sleep, the whispers came louder, the shadows in my room sharper. I started wearing gloves to bed, even though I didn't touch anything, just to feel some measure of control over my own body. Eating became a ritual of unease. My stomach craved foods I didn't recognize, and sometimes, the taste of something would trigger a memory that wasn't mine. A hurried meal in a sterile room, the metallic tang of blood, the scent of antiseptic clinging to fabric. I felt my body remembering its previous owners, as if my own instincts had been overwritten by borrowed lives. Every step outside the apartment reminded me of vulnerability. My senses had sharpened unnaturally, could hear distant sirens, feel vibrations in the sidewalk, smell the faintest trace of smoke blocks away. It should have been impressive. It should have been useful. Instead, it was terrifying. And then I realized he wasn't done with me. I went back to the hospital because I couldn't ignore it any longer. The fear had coiled inside me, tight and insistent, and I needed answers. My feet carried me through the familiar halls, the fluorescent lights flickering faintly, throwing long, distorted shadows that seemed to watch me. Every step made my pulse thrum in unnatural patterns, each heartbeat echoing with something that wasn't entirely mine. The restricted fourth-floor wing called to me, the one we'd all whispered about but never entered. The door was ajar, an invitation I couldn't resist. Inside, the room was brighter than I remembered, filled with a sterile hum that seemed almost musical. At the center, Vellum worked alone, or so it appeared. A patient lay on the table, their chest open, and Vellum moved with the same calm precision I had witnessed before. Instruments glinted unnaturally, and for a moment, I thought I saw one of them twitch independently, like it had a life of its own. I wanted to scream, to warn the patient, but something held me back, a paralyzing mixture of curiosity and terror. And then I noticed others, lurking in the corners, shadows of bodies that didn't belong entirely to one person. Partially modified survivors, I realized, their eyes hollow but aware, whispering warnings as I approached. Don't let him," one muttered, voice trembling. "He's continuity," another whispered. I didn't need them to explain. I had felt the same in my own chest, in the borrowed memories and shifting organs. Vellum sensed me before I could step forward, and he turned, tilting his head with that unnerving calm. "You've returned," he said, voice soft, almost pleased. "I wondered when curiosity would drag your back." I swallowed, fighting to regain some composure. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. "Why us?" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Do you feel it?" he asked, stepping closer, inspecting me like a specimen. You carry their memories now. You carry me. I am not finished with you because the work is ongoing. We are continuity threads of one another, networks of life intertwined. Every organ shared, every memory inherited, adds to the whole. And you, my friend, are only the 13th. The word a 13th struck me like ice in the chest. 13th. There had been 12 before me. 12 vessels shaped and altered, and I was now part of the chain, the network, a living archive of others. I wanted to turn and flee, but before I could, Vellum extended a gloved hand, his eyes drilling into mine. The process is irreversible. Your body remembers more than you do. Your thoughts are influenced, your reactions borrowed. You are no longer merely yourself, and that is precisely why you survived. I stepped back, panic rising as the survivors in the corners pressed their warnings closer. I heard whispers of failures, of those who resisted, of the vessels that didn't last long enough to complete the cycle. The room felt alive, pulsating with the unnatural rhythm of borrowed hearts and lungs, veins of memory streaming beneath the skin. I ran. Every step echoed, every corner of the hospital seeming to twist against me, walls elongating unnaturally. But running didn't change what was inside me. Every pulse reminded me that I was connected, that my body was a repository of lives I hadn't chosen, and that Vellum's design had already claimed me. I stumbled into a stairwell, gasping, mind spinning, and I knew something I couldn't escape. He was not just in the hospital. He was in the network now, and pieces of him beat in rhythm with my own. The chain was complete, and I had no way of breaking it. I thought leaving the hospital would free me. I ran through the night, each step pounding against asphalt as though I could outrun my own chest. The city lights blurred, and the sounds of traffic became a distant hum, but the sensation inside me refused to quiet. My organs were no longer obedient. They had their own agenda. My left lung collapsed without warning, a sharp, suffocating pinch that stole my breath. I doubled over, gasping, only to feel it reinflate moments later as if nothing had happened. My own heart, skipped wildly, then settled into a rhythm that didn't belong to me. It beat like someone else's fear, sinking to a panic I could neither explain nor control. Every pulse reminded me that escape was meaningless. My body was no longer mine. I ducked into an alley, pressing my back to the wall, trying to calm myself. But the whispers in my chest were louder now. Pieces of Vellum, remnants of those who came before, memories embedded in my veins, they were there, sinking with me. The organs remember, I realized with a horror that rooted me to the concrete. Wherever I went, he could find me. Not through sight, not through sound, but through the living map of the bodies he had shaped. Do not attempt to track that hospital. The name doesn't exist on maps anymore. The floors, the rooms, the operating suites, they shift. People who enter sometimes vanish entirely. If curiosity is what brought you here, let it die quietly in your mind. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe I could fool him. Maybe I could fight the connections within me. But each heartbeat reminded me that it was already too late. my stomach twisted at unfamiliar cravings. My liver, my kidneys, even my blood seemed aware of rhythms outside my control. I could feel the slow sinking, the merging of my own biology with his intent. Every organ, a wire in a network I hadn't agreed to join. I walked through the city, trying to blend in. I spoke to strangers, drank coffee, touched doorknobs. But the awareness never left. My hands twitched with someone else's memory, my pulse spiked with someone else's dread. Even now, as I speak to you, I can feel its subtle, insistent guidance. Vellum is patient. He waits. He doesn't need to chase. And yet, I am alive. Somehow, I am alive. That is all I have to cling to, the illusion of freedom, the fragment of autonomy, a body that obeys only partially. The rest is his. I only have time to tell you this before he calls them back. I can feel him now. Not as a memory, not as a whisper, but as a presence that pulses with my heartbeat. Vellum isn't just a surgeon who altered my body, he is inside me. A piece of him, his consciousness, his intent, embedded within my organs, my veins, my mind. Every thought I have, every decision I make, is touched by him. Slowly, imperceptibly, I am becoming him. It started subtly. A phrase would slip into my speech, a cadence that wasn't mine. My hands, once unsteady, now move with deliberate precision, calculating, observing. My eyes scan a room and notice the details others overlook. I catch myself adjusting objects I touch, aligning them, cleaning surfaces, in ways I didn't know I cared about. I hear the faintest hum from within, a rhythm that matches his. I want to tell you to stop reading, stop listening, stop imagining. But part of me knows that by doing so, I am already complicit. The piece of him inside me learns, adapts, spreads. And maybe, when you feel your own pulse quicken as you hear this, that flutter in your chest isn't yours. If you feel it, don't panic. It might just be me looking back. I've started noticing others. Faces in crowds that seem to flicker in and out of focus. Voices that mimic the cadence I've begun to hear in my own chest. I suspect they are watching two vessels in the same network, tuned into me, tuned into him. I warn you, cautiously, do not seek answers where they should not exist. Curiosity is contagious, and the network grows with every mind it touches. Even now, as I speak, I sense the transformation accelerating. Thoughts that are alien become familiar. Impulses that once shocked me now feel necessary. I recognize patterns, predict movements, understand organs, systems, people, the world differently than I ever did before. I can feel him smiling from within, pleased with the progress. And yet, I address you, because some part of me, my fading self, hopes to warn you, to preserve a fragment of what I was. Have you ever felt a shiver that isn't caused by cold, a sudden instinct, an urge to act or avoid? If you have, leave a comment. Share it. Record it. The network is curious. It remembers patterns, traces, pulses, and whispers. This is my final case file, or maybe my first. I am no longer certain where the line between patient and surgeon ends, where self ends and continuation begins. But I know this, once you feel the flutter, once you sense the whisper, you will understand that some bodies are never entirely their own. And some surgeons never entirely leave.